Still the two figures pushed up the vertiginous trail, up the icy staircases and rock pitches. As they rose, the roar of the waterfall echoed strangely between the walls of stone, mingling with the rising wind like mysterious voices speaking in an unknown tongue. When the travelers at last topped the ridge, the wind almost halted them in their tracks, whipping their robes and biting at their exposed skin. They hunched against it and, pulling their reluctant horses forward, continued along the spine of the ridge until they reached the remains of a ruined village. It was a bleak place, the houses thrown down by some ancient cataclysm, their timbers scattered and broken, the mud bricks dissolving back into the earth from which they had been formed. In the center of the village, a pile of prayer stones rose, topped by a pole from which snapped dozens of tattered prayer flags. To one side lay an ancient cemetery whose retaining wall had collapsed, and now erosion had opened the graves, scattering bones and skulls down a long scree slope. As the two approached, a group of ravens flapped up in noisy protest from the wreckage, their scratchy cries rising toward the leaden clouds. At the pile of stones, one of the travelers stopped and dismounted, gesturing for the other to wait. He bent down, picked up an old stone, and added it to the pile. Then he paused briefly in silent meditation, the wind lashing at his robes, before retaking the reins of his horse. They continued on. Beyond the deserted village, the trail narrowed sharply along a knife-edge ridge. Struggling against the violence of the wind, the two figures inched along it, arcing around the shoulder of a mountain, and then, at last, they could just begin to spy the battlements and pinnacles of a vast fortress standing dully against the dark sky. This was the monastery known as Gazalrig Chong, a name that might be translated as the Jewel of the Awareness of Emptiness. As the trail continued around the side of the mountain, the monastery came fully into view. Massive red-washed walls and buttresses mounting the sides of a barren granite rock, ending in a complex of pinnacled roofs and towers that shone here and there with patches of gold leaf. The Gazalrig Chong Monastery was one of the very few in Tibet to have escaped the ravages of the Chinese invasion, in which soldiers drove out the Dalai Lama, killed thousands of monks, and destroyed countless monasteries and religious structures. Gazalrig Chong was spared partly because of its extreme remoteness and its proximity to the disputed border with Nepal, but also due to a simple bureaucratic oversight. Its very existence had somehow escaped official attention. Even today, the map of the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region does not locate this monastery, and the monks have taken great pains to keep it that way. The trail passed by a steep scree slope where a group of vultures picked away at some scattered bones. "There appears to have been a recent death," the man said, murmuring and nodding toward the heavy birds, which hopped about utterly fearless. "How so?" asked the second traveler. "When a monk dies, his body is butchered and thrown to the wild animals. It is considered the highest honor to have your mortal remains nourish and sustain other living things." "A peculiar custom." "On the contrary, the logic is impeccable. Our customs are peculiar." The trail ended at a small gate in a massive encircling wall. The gate was open, and a Buddhist monk stood there, wrapped in robes of scarlet and saffron, holding a burning torch as if expecting them. The two huddled travelers passed through the gate, still leading their horses. A second monk appeared and silently took the reins, leading them off to stables within the encircling wall. The travelers stopped before the first monk in the gathering darkness. He said nothing, but merely waited. The first traveler pulled back his cowl, revealing the long, pale face, white blonde hair, marble features, and silvery eyes of Special Agent Aloysius Pendergast of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The monk turned toward the other. The second figure removed its cowl with a tentative movement.